Blood trickled down Naomi Jenkins' chin as security dragged her from the first-class cabin. "This isn't over," she whispered, clutching her phone. 24 hours later, Summit Airlines stock plummeted $500 million. The CEO's phone rang. On the screen, Naomi Jenkins, civil rights attorney. Before we dive into this shocking story of discrimination and corporate accountability, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button if you believe justice should prevail when corporations cross the line, and subscribe to follow more stories where ordinary people take extraordinary stands against discrimination. Now let's see how a simple first-class ticket turned into a $500 million lesson. Naomi Jenkins straightened her charcoal gray suit jacket as she walked through the gleaming terminal of O'Hare International Airport. At 42, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned her place in the world. The daughter of civil rights activists who had marched alongside Dr. King in the 60s, Naomi had grown up hearing stories of segregated water fountains and the fight for basic dignity. Those stories hadn't stayed in the past. They had fueled her rise to become one of Chicago's most respected civil rights attorneys. Today's journey was particularly important. In her sleek leather briefcase, she carried the presentation she would deliver tomorrow to the American Bar Association's annual conference in Atlanta. Her speech on contemporary discrimination law would be attended by Supreme Court justices, law school deans, and hundreds of the nation's top attorneys. After 15 years of fighting discrimination cases, Naomi had earned her reputation as a legal powerhouse who never backed down. "Gate B14 for Atlanta, boarding in 30 minutes, she murmured to herself, checking her watch. She had arrived early, as was her habit. In her line of work, preparation was everything. Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from her law partner, Marcus Washington. "All set for tomorrow? The reservation at Marcel's is confirmed for after your speech. The managing partners from Jenner and Block want to discuss that class action." She smiled. The case Marcus referenced could be their biggest yet. A nationwide employment discrimination suit that could set precedents for decades. But first, this speech had to go perfectly. Naomi typed back, "Presentation ready, boarding soon, see you in Atlanta." She tucked her phone away and approached the check-in counter. The Summit Airlines attendant barely looked up as she slid her ID and frequent flyer card across the counter. "I'm checking in for the Atlanta flight, first class, seat 2A. The attendant's eyes flicked up, a momentary flash of surprise crossing her face before she regained her professional demeanor. "Yes, Ms. Jenkins. You've accumulated 120,000 miles this year. Would you like to use some for an upgrade?" she asked automatically. "I've already booked first class using miles," Naomi replied calmly. She was used to this, the assumption that she belonged in economy, despite her professional attire and premier status card. It happened almost every time she flew. "Oh, I see that now," the attendant said, her tone shifting slightly. "My apologies. You're all set for first class, seat 2A. Naomi nodded, taking her boarding pass. These small interactions, these microaggressions, were familiar companions in her journey through predominantly white professional spaces. As one of only 3 black female partners at her prestigious law firm, she had learned to navigate them with grace while never surrendering her dignity. She made her way through security with practiced efficiency. The TSA agent examined her ID a beat longer than necessary, looking between her face and the photo twice. Naomi maintained eye contact, her expression neutral. Another day, another reminder that her presence in certain spaces still registered as unexpected. At the gate, she reviewed her presentation notes one final time. Her argument centered on the evolution of discrimination in the 21st century, how it had become more subtle, but no less damaging. The irony wasn't lost on her that she experienced examples of her own thesis nearly every day. When first-class boarding was announced, Naomi gathered her things and moved toward the gate. The flight attendant scanning boarding passes smiled warmly at the white businessman ahead of her, chatting about the weather in Atlanta. When Naomi stepped forward, the same attendant's smile stiffened slightly. "Boarding pass, please," she said, her tone shifting to something more formal. Naomi handed it over, noting the quick double-take as the attendant verified the first-class designation. It was a familiar reaction. Surprise followed by a recalibration of expectations. "Thank you, Miss Jenkins," the attendant said, returning, her professional smile. "Enjoy your flight." Naomi walked down the jet bridge, mentally shifting gears to prepare for her presentation. She had long ago learned that dwelling on these small incidents only drained energy she needed elsewhere. Still, she cataloged them automatically, data points in the ongoing study of American race relations that informed both her personal navigation and professional advocacy. The first-class cabin gleamed with polished surfaces and wide cream-colored leather seats. Naomi found 2A by the window and settled in, arranging her workspace efficiently. She placed her briefcase under the seat in front of her, keeping her presentation materials and laptop easily accessible. She would use the flight time to make final refinements to her speech. Other first-class passengers boarded, predominantly white men in business attire, who took their seats with the entitled ease of people accustomed to occupying premium spaces. A few glanced at Naomi with subtle surprise before looking away. She had grown adept at reading these looks, the momentary recalculation happening behind their eyes. Flight attendant Melissa Parker moved through the cabin, offering pre-flight drinks to passengers. "Sparkling water, orange juice, champagne?" she asked a balding executive across the aisle, her blonde ponytail swinging as she leaned down attentively. Naomi waited for her turn, reviewing email on her phone. When Melissa approached the white man in 2B but continued to ignore Naomi, she looked up expectantly. "Excuse me," Naomi said politely. "Could I have some water, please?" Melissa glanced at her with a tight smile. "We'll begin economy service after takeoff." "I'm in first class," Naomi responded evenly, gesturing to her seat. "Seat 2A. "Oh," Melissa said, her expression unchanged. "I'll be right back." She moved away without taking Naomi's drink order, continuing to serve other first-class passengers. Naomi took a deep breath, deciding it wasn't worth pursuing. She had bigger concerns than a pre-flight beverage. The remaining passengers boarded, and the final first-class passenger arrived, a tall white man in his 50s, with silver-streaked hair and an expensive suit. Trevor Whitfield, according to the pleasant greeting Melissa gave him as he approached. He stopped at row 2, looking at his boarding pass and then at Naomi with confusion. "I believe you're in my seat," he said confidently. "I'm in 2A, Naomi replied, showing him her boarding pass. "You must be 2B, right next to me." Trevor frowned, checking his boarding pass again. "I specifically requested a window seat." "I understand, but my assignment is 2A, Naomi said calmly. "I'm sure the gate agent can help with seating preferences for your next flight." Trevor's jaw tightened as he reluctantly took the aisle seat beside her. Almost immediately, he pressed the call button. When Melissa arrived, he leaned in and spoke in a low voice that Naomi could still hear clearly. "Is there another window seat available in first class? I'm not comfortable with this arrangement." Melissa looked between Trevor and Naomi, then nodded sympathetically. "Let me check what's available." She returned moments later, leaning down to speak privately to Trevor. "I'm sorry, sir. We're full in first class today, but I'll make sure you're well taken care of." Throughout this exchange, neither acknowledged Naomi directly. She focused on her screen, outwardly unaffected, while mentally adding this to the catalog of incidents she navigated daily. As a civil rights attorney, she understood better than most how these interactions functioned, the implicit biases, the whispered discomforts, the presumptions of who belonged where. The aircraft doors closed, and the safety demonstration began. Naomi noticed that she still hadn't received the water she'd requested, while Trevor was already sipping a scotch that Melissa had delivered with a warm smile. Rather than create an issue, Naomi decided to simply ask again after takeoff. Her presentation was what mattered today. Little did she know that this routine flight would become anything but routine, and that by this time tomorrow, her name would be known nationwide, and Summit Airlines would be facing the biggest crisis in its corporate history. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Naomi opened her laptop to review her presentation slides one final time. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, creating the professional atmosphere typical of first-class morning flights. Quiet conversation, the soft tapping of keyboards, and the occasional clink of ice in crystal glasses. Flight attendant Melissa Parker moved efficiently through the cabin, refreshing drinks and taking breakfast orders from first-class passengers. She worked her way methodically from the front, smiling and chatting with passengers as she took their selections from the gourmet breakfast menu. "Good morning, Mr. Whitfield. What can I get you for breakfast today? The frittata is excellent, or perhaps the Belgian waffles?" Melissa leaned slightly toward Trevor, her voice warm and engaging. "I'll take the frittata and another scotch," Trevor replied, not looking up from his financial newspaper. "Wonderful choice. I'll have that right out for you," Melissa responded, then turned to move to the next row without acknowledging Naomi. "Excuse me," Naomi said, her tone professional but firm. "I haven't been offered breakfast yet." Melissa turned back, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly. "The economy meal service will begin shortly." "I'm in first class, seat 2A, Naomi," replied evenly, gesturing to her clearly first-class accommodations. "I'd like to order breakfast, please." Melissa's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at Naomi's seat, then at her face. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Naomi maintained her composure, though the request was unusual. Flight attendants didn't typically verify boarding passes mid-flight. She reached into her handbag and produced the boarding pass, which clearly showed first class, seat 2A. Melissa examined it with unusual scrutiny, turning it over as if looking for evidence of forgery. "This seat is usually reserved for our platinum members," she said, her tone suggesting irregularity. "I am a platinum member," Naomi replied. "I fly over 100,000 miles annually with Summit." From beside her, Trevor shifted uncomfortably. "I don't mean to intrude," he said, though his tone suggested exactly that intent. "But I specifically requested not to be seated next to anyone on this flight. I paid for extra space." Melissa's expression changed to one of concern. "I see. Let me get my supervisor." As she walked away, Naomi felt a familiar tension building in her chest, the combination of frustration, indignation, and the exhausting awareness that she was experiencing something that wouldn't happen to her white counterparts. As a civil rights attorney, she recognized the patterns all too well. Around her, other first-class passengers pretended to focus on their devices and meals, but she could feel their sideways glances. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious, a few seemingly satisfied that an apparent irregularity was being addressed. Minutes later, Melissa returned with the lead flight attendant, Barbara Reynolds, a woman in her 50s with streaked blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Barbara's expression was already set in stone before she even reached row 2. "Good morning," Barbara said, her tone formal and cold. "There seems to be some confusion about seating arrangements." "There's no confusion," Naomi replied calmly. "I'm in my assigned seat, 2A, first class. I've shown my boarding pass already." Barbara glanced at Trevor, who was now visibly agitated. "Sir, can you confirm what the issue is from your perspective?" "I specifically booked a solo seat with extra space," Trevor said firmly. "This arrangement is uncomfortable for me. I'd like it addressed." Barbara turned back to Naomi. "Ma'am, there seems to be some misunderstanding. First-class passengers are typically notified about their seating assignments at the gate. Perhaps you missed an announcement about seating changes?" Naomi straightened in her seat, her legal training kicking in. "There was no such announcement. I boarded with a valid first-class ticket for seat 2A, which is where I'm sitting. I'm a platinum member who flies this route regularly." Barbara's lips thinned. "May I see your boarding pass and ID, please?" Again, Naomi provided her documentation. Barbara examined them with the same excessive scrutiny Melissa had shown, then looked at Naomi with thinly veiled skepticism. "These seem to be in order, but there's clearly been a booking error. Mr. Whitfield is one of our most valued executive platinum members, and he's expressed discomfort with the current arrangement." "His discomfort is not my concern," Naomi replied, maintaining her professional tone. "I have a valid ticket for this seat. Unless you can show me a legitimate reason why I should move, I'm staying where I am." Barbara's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm trying to resolve this amicably. We can offer you a complimentary meal in economy while we sort this out." The implication was clear. Despite her valid first-class ticket, Naomi was being asked to move to economy to accommodate a white passenger's discomfort with sitting beside her. The familiar burn of injustice rose in her throat, but she kept her voice level. "I paid for first class. I'm seated in first class. I will remain in first class," Naomi stated firmly. By now, the interaction had drawn the attention of everyone in the first-class cabin. Some passengers looked away uncomfortably, while others watched with unconcealed interest. From the row behind, Naomi heard a whispered comment. "Why is this becoming such a big deal? Just move her." Barbara lowered her voice. "Ma'am, if you continue to be disruptive, I'll need to involve the captain." "Disruptive?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. "I'm sitting quietly in my assigned seat. How exactly am I being disruptive?" "Your tone and attitude are creating a tense atmosphere in the cabin," Barbara replied. "Mr. Whitfield and other passengers are uncomfortable." Naomi looked around the cabin pointedly. "The only tension here is coming from your staff's refusal to treat me like every other first-class passenger." Trevor interjected, his voice carrying across the cabin. "This is ridiculous. I just want to enjoy my flight in peace." Barbara straightened. "I need to involve the captain. This situation is escalating unnecessarily." As Barbara walked toward the cockpit, Naomi made a crucial decision. She discreetly removed her phone and enabled the audio recording function, placing it in her jacket pocket. As a civil rights attorney, she knew the value of documentation. Around her, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin had changed completely. The professional quiet had been replaced with tense whispers and stares. A young white woman in her 20s, across the aisle, Lily Sanders, according to her open laptop screen, caught Naomi's eye with a sympathetic glance before quickly looking away. Minutes later, Barbara returned with Captain Richard Morgan, a tall man with a silver-streaked beard and the authoritative presence that came with his uniform. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, directing his question to Barbara rather than assessing the situation independently. "This passenger is causing a disturbance," Barbara explained, gesturing to Naomi. "She's refusing to cooperate with crew instructions and making other passengers uncomfortable." "That's absolutely false," Naomi interjected calmly. "I'm sitting in my assigned first-class seat, which I paid for. I've been denied service that other passengers received, and now I'm being falsely accused of being disruptive." Captain Morgan barely glanced at Naomi before turning back to Barbara. "Have you verified her boarding pass?" "Yes, but there seems to be a booking irregularity," Barbara replied. "Mr. Whitfield is uncomfortable with the seating arrangement." The captain turned to Trevor. "Sir, can you explain the issue from your perspective?" Trevor straightened in his seat. "I booked a window seat with extra space. I'm in an important meeting immediately after landing and need to prepare without distraction. This current arrangement isn't what I paid for." Captain Morgan nodded sympathetically before finally addressing Naomi directly. "Ma'am, I understand. There's been a misunderstanding, but my flight attendants have the authority to reassign seats as necessary for the comfort and safety of all passengers." "There's no misunderstanding," Naomi replied firmly. "I have a valid ticket for this specific seat. The only issue here is that your staff seems to have a problem with me occupying it." "Ma'am, your tone is confrontational," the captain said, his own tone hardening. "I need you to comply with my crew's instructions." "What exactly are those instructions?" Naomi asked. "To give up my rightfully purchased first-class seat because another passenger doesn't want to sit next to me? On what grounds?" The captain's jaw tightened. "If you continue to argue, I'll have no choice but to have you removed from the aircraft." From across the aisle, Lily Sanders suddenly spoke up. "Excuse me, but this doesn't seem right. She's just sitting in her assigned seat." Captain Morgan turned a stern gaze on Lily. "Please don't involve yourself, ma'am. This is being handled." "It's being handled poorly," Naomi stated. "I'm an attorney, and I recognize discriminatory treatment when I see it." At the word discriminatory, the captain's expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation and entirely unfounded. This is about passenger comfort and compliance with crew instructions." "Then please explicitly state what policy I'm violating by sitting in my assigned first-class seat," Naomi challenged. Instead of answering, Captain Morgan turned to Barbara. "Call the air marshals. We have an uncooperative passenger who needs to be removed." The cabin fell silent. The escalation was shocking, from a seating misunderstanding to summoning federal officers in minutes. "You're removing me for sitting in my assigned seat?" Naomi asked incredulously. "I hope everyone here is witnessing this." Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. A few had their phones out, discreetly recording the interaction. Lily looked distressed but had fallen silent after the captain's rebuke. Minutes later, 2 air marshals boarded the plane and approached. Row 2. One was a tall white man with a military-style haircut, the other a shorter Hispanic man with a stern expression. "Ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us," the taller marshal stated. "On what grounds?" Naomi asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Failure to comply with crew instructions. Please come with us now." "I'm in my assigned seat with a valid ticket," Naomi replied. "I've broken no laws or regulations. This removal is unlawful." The marshals exchanged glances. The shorter one leaned down. "Ma'am, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but you are getting off this plane." Naomi remained seated. "I will not voluntarily give up my rightfully purchased seat. If you remove me, you'll be doing so without legal justification." The taller marshal reached for her arm. "Please stand up, ma'am." "Do not touch me," Naomi stated firmly. "I do not consent to being removed from my lawful seat." The marshal grabbed her arm anyway, attempting to pull her to her feet. Naomi did not resist physically, but she did not assist either, remaining limp as they tried to extract her from the window seat. "This is assault," she stated clearly, making sure her phone continued recording in her pocket. The marshals became more forceful, now physically lifting her from the seat while Trevor pressed himself against the opposite side of his seat, watching with a mixture of satisfaction and discomfort. As they dragged her into the aisle, Naomi's lip caught on the armrest, splitting open. She tasted blood but remained composed, knowing that appearing angry or aggressive would only reinforce stereotypes and potentially escalate the situation further. "Everyone on this flight is witnessing a civil rights violation," she announced calmly as they pulled her down the aisle. Blood trickled from her lip, staining the collar of her white blouse. "Summit Airlines is removing a valid first-class passenger, solely because a white passenger was uncomfortable sitting next to me." The first-class cabin was deadly silent as she was dragged past. Some passengers looked away in shame, others watched in shock, and a few recorded the incident on their phones. Lily Sanders had tears in her eyes but remained frozen in her seat. As they reached the door of the aircraft, Naomi turned her head, making eye contact with as many witnesses as possible. Blood running down her chin, she spoke clearly. "This isn't over." What Summit Airlines didn't know was that they had just manhandled one of the nation's top civil rights attorneys, and by this time tomorrow, their company would be in free fall, hemorrhaging $500 million in value overnight. The fluorescent lights of the airport security office cast harsh shadows across Naomi Jenkins' face as she sat rigidly in a cold metal chair. Her split lip had stopped bleeding but throbbed painfully, a physical reminder of the injustice she'd just experienced. 2 TSA officers stood by the door while an airport police officer sat across from her, his expression a mixture of boredom and suspicion. "So you were removed from the aircraft for being disruptive," Officer Reynolds stated, reading from the report submitted by the Summit Airlines crew. "That is categorically false," Naomi replied, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions beneath her composed exterior. "I was seated in my assigned first-class seat with a valid ticket when I was denied service, harassed, and ultimately physically removed without cause." The officer's eyebrow raised slightly. "According to the captain's statement, you refused to comply with crew instructions and created a hostile environment." "I refused to give up my rightfully purchased seat because another passenger felt uncomfortable sitting next to me," Naomi corrected. "No legitimate crew instruction was given. I was simply told to move from first class despite having a valid ticket." Have you ever wondered what you would do if faced with blatant discrimination in a public setting? Would you stand your ground like Naomi, knowing the potential consequences? Comment number 1 if you believe she was right to refuse moving from her assigned seat, or number 2 if you think she should have complied to avoid escalation. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe justice matters in everyday situations, and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up against discrimination. What do you think happened next when a prestigious civil rights attorney was forcibly removed from her seat? Let's find out. Officer Reynolds tapped his pen against his notepad. Ms. Jenkins, I understand you're upset, but interfering with airline crew is a federal offense. I'm well aware of federal aviation regulations, Naomi responded, her legal training evident in her precise language. I'm also aware of federal civil rights laws prohibiting discrimination in public accommodations, which is what I experienced today. She reached carefully into her pocket and withdrew her phone. I have audio recording of the entire interaction. Would you like to hear it before proceeding with any charges? The officer's expression changed subtly. You recorded the incident? Yes. As a civil rights attorney, I understand the importance of documentation, Naomi stated. The recording will clearly demonstrate that I was calm, reasonable, and within my rights at all times. This new information seemed to give the officer pause. He glanced toward the door where a Summit Airlines representative hovered, a young man in a crisp uniform with an anxious expression. Let me consult with my supervisor, Officer Reynolds said, standing up. Please wait here. As he stepped outside, the airline representative approached Naomi with a forced smile. Ms. Jenkins, I'm Kevin Brooks from Summit Airlines Customer Relations. I want to sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding today. Naomi regarded him coolly. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Mr. Brooks. It was discrimination, plain and simple. Kevin's smile faltered. We at Summit take such allegations very seriously. I'd like to offer you a voucher for a future flight, and our sincere regrets for any inconvenience. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a voucher for $500 and a form that Naomi immediately recognized as a liability waiver. You want me to sign away my right to legal action in exchange for $500? Naomi asked incredulously. Kevin shifted uncomfortably. We're simply trying to resolve this situation amicably. The voucher is a goodwill gesture. Naomi slid the envelope back without touching the waiver. Mr. Brooks, I've spent 15 years representing clients in discrimination cases. This goodwill gesture is insultingly inadequate, and frankly, reveals that Summit doesn't understand the gravity of what occurred today. Ms. Jenkins, I was publicly humiliated, physically assaulted, and removed from a flight I paid for solely because of racial bias, Naomi interrupted, her voice remaining measured but firm. I missed a critical professional presentation that I cannot reschedule. Your crew members' actions were not only morally reprehensible but legally actionable under multiple federal statutes. Kevin's professional veneer cracked slightly. Those are serious allegations that Summit Airlines categorically denies. Denials won't matter when the video evidence from multiple passengers goes public, Naomi responded. Which I assure you, it will. The door opened, and Officer Reynolds returned with a senior police officer. Their expressions had shifted notably. Ms. Jenkins, the senior officer began, after reviewing the situation, we won't be pursuing any charges related to this incident. You're free to go. Naomi stood, gathering her belongings with deliberate calm. Thank you. I'll need documentation of this detention, including the names and badge numbers of all officers involved, as well as copies of any reports filed. The officers exchanged glances, recognizing the language of someone preparing for legal action. We can provide those, the senior officer agreed reluctantly. As Naomi prepared to leave, she turned to the Summit representative. Mr. Brooks, please inform your corporate counsel that I'll be filing formal complaints with the Department of Transportation, the FAA, and the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. I'll also be pursuing civil remedies for the violations that occurred today. Kevin's face paled. Ms. Jenkins, I'm sure we can find a more productive resolution. That opportunity passed when your employees dragged me off a plane for being black in first class, Naomi stated flatly. All further communication should go through legal channels. With that, she walked out of the security office, her professional demeanor intact despite the chaos of the morning. Only when she reached a private bathroom did she allow herself a moment of emotional release, her hands shaking as she examined her injured lip in the mirror. The taste of blood had faded, but the sting of humiliation remained sharp. Naomi had spent her career fighting for others facing discrimination. Now she found herself at the center of exactly the kind of case she usually litigated. She took a deep breath and called her law partner. "Marcus, it's Naomi. I'm not going to make the presentation." Her voice finally cracked slightly. "Something happened on the flight. I need our crisis team activated immediately." As she explained the situation, Marcus Washington's initial concern gave way to strategic focus. By the time she ended the call, a plan was already forming. The Jenkins & Washington law firm was known for its formidable response to civil rights violations, and now that expertise would be directed at Summit Airlines. Meanwhile, across the terminal, Kevin Brooks was making a very different phone call. To Summit's corporate headquarters, his voice tight with stress as he explained that the passenger they'd removed wasn't just any customer. She was Naomi Jenkins, founding partner of one of the nation's premier civil rights law firms, and a litigator with a perfect record of victories against corporate discrimination. Outside the airport, Naomi's phone buzzed with notifications. The incident was already spreading on social media. A passenger had posted a partial video showing her being dragged down the aisle, blood on her face with the caption, "Black woman with first-class ticket forcibly removed from a Summit Air flight today. She was calm. They were not. Flying while black." The clip had already been shared thousands of times. By the time Naomi's taxi reached her hotel, 3 news outlets had contacted her for comment. She declined for now, knowing that strategic timing would be crucial. First, she needed to document her injuries, collect witness statements, and coordinate with her legal team. What neither Naomi nor Summit Airlines yet realized was that this incident would soon spiral beyond a personal injury case into a national, reckoning on race, corporate accountability, and the everyday indignities that Black Americans continued to face. By this time tomorrow, Summit's stock would be in free fall, and Naomi Jenkins would become the catalyst for a corporate crisis that would transform an industry. As she entered her hotel room, Naomi caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, poised, professional, with a visibly split lip that told a story no corporate denial could erase. She straightened her shoulders and reached for her laptop. The battle had just begun. The elegant conference room of the Jenkins & Washington law firm hummed with focused energy as Naomi sat at the head of the mahogany table, surrounded by her crisis response team. The wall-mounted screens displayed social media metrics, news, headlines, and a growing collection of video clips from the flight. "The initial footage has reached 2 million views in 3 hours, reported Jasmine Chen, their digital strategist. Her fingers flew across her keyboard as graphs on the screen updated in real time. "It's being picked up by major news outlets now. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox have all run segments in the past hour." Naomi nodded, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at her swollen lip. A professional photographer had already documented her injuries. The split lip, bruising on her arms where the air marshals had gripped her. The bloodstain on her white blouse preserved as evidence. Marcus Washington, her law partner for 15 years, paced behind her, his tall frame tense with controlled anger. "Summit issued their first statement 20 minutes ago," he said, gesturing to another screen. The corporate statement appeared. "Summit Airlines is aware of a situation involving a passenger on Flight 537 to Atlanta this morning. Safety is our top priority, and our crew members are trained to ensure all passengers comply with crew instructions for everyone's well-being. We are investigating the circumstances and have no further comment at this time." "Generic corporate nonsense," Marcus muttered. "No acknowledgement of what actually happened." "They're hoping it blows over," Naomi replied, her voice steady despite the throbbing pain in her lip. "But we won't let it." The door opened and Terrence Jackson, their investigative specialist, entered with a tablet. "We've identified and contacted 12 passengers from the flight who witnessed the incident. 7 have already provided preliminary statements confirming your account, including Lily Sanders, the young woman who tried to speak up for you." "Any pushback from the airline toward the witnesses?" Naomi asked. "Summit's legal team has been calling passengers, asking them to sign NDAs before giving statements," Terrence confirmed. "We're advising witnesses not to sign anything." Naomi turned to Rebecca Goldstein, their media relations expert. What's the public sentiment so far? Rebecca scrolled through her analysis. Overwhelmingly supportive of you. The hashtag, #Justice for Naomi, is trending nationally. Summit's social media accounts are being flooded with criticism. Their customer service lines are jammed with people canceling reservations. And most importantly, Marcus added, leaning over a financial report, their stock dropped 7% in the last hour of trading. Investors are getting nervous about potential fallout. Naomi absorbed this information, her mind already mapping out strategy. As a veteran civil rights attorney, she'd orchestrated many campaigns against corporate discrimination, but never as the client herself. The dual role required perfect balance, being both the wronged party and the strategic legal mind guiding the response. Summit will try 3 approaches, she predicted, addressing the room. First, they'll attempt to frame this as a service, misunderstanding rather than discrimination. When that fails, they'll look for ways to discredit me personally. When that fails, they'll offer a significant private settlement with an NDA to make this disappear. And our response? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. We reject all 3, Naomi stated firmly. This isn't about me or money. It's about accountability and systemic change. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from a blocked number. Naomi glanced at it, and then at Marcus, who nodded. She put the call on speaker. Naomi Jenkins speaking. Ms. Jenkins, this is Michael Brennan, General Counsel for 200M Airlines. The voice was smooth, practiced in crisis management. I wanted to reach out personally regarding this morning's unfortunate incident. Mr. Brennan, Naomi acknowledged. Coolly. I presume you've reviewed the videos and audio recordings by now. A slight pause. We're still gathering information from all parties involved. I want to assure you that Summit takes these allegations very seriously. They're not allegations, Mr. Brennan. They're documented facts, Naomi corrected. I was, physically removed from your aircraft despite having a valid first-class ticket, solely because a white passenger expressed discomfort sitting next to me, and your crew facilitated this discrimination. That characterization is premature, Brennan responded, his tone remaining carefully measured. There were concerns about disruptive behavior that The only disruption was caused by your crew's discriminatory treatment, Naomi interrupted. The audio and video evidence makes this clear, as do multiple witness statements we've already collected. Another pause. Ms. Jenkins, we'd like to resolve this matter amicably. Summit is prepared to offer compensation for your inconvenience and any misunderstanding that may have occurred. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Mr. Brennan. It was textbook racial discrimination in violation of federal law, Naomi stated. And as I'm sure you're aware, I've spent my career litigating exactly these types of cases. The tension threw. The phone was almost palpable. What are you seeking, Ms. Jenkins? Accountability and systemic change, she replied without hesitation, starting with the termination of the crew members involved, a complete overhaul of your diversity training protocols, and public acknowledgement of the discriminatory treatment I experienced. Those demands are excessive for what could easily be characterized as a customer service issue, Brennan countered, his professional veneer cracking slightly. Then we'll let the courts and the court of public opinion decide, Naomi responded calmly. I'll be holding a press conference tomorrow morning. I suggest you prepare your CEO for the questions that will follow. After ending the call, Naomi looked around at her team. They're still in denial. They think they can manage this like a typical PR problem. Their loss, Marcus replied with grim satisfaction. We've got something they don't know about yet. He nodded to Terrence, who tapped his tablet. A flight attendant from Summit reached out to us an hour ago. Tanya Williams. She's worked for Summit for 7 years and says this isn't an isolated incident. She has documentation of at least 24 similar cases in the past year alone. Black passengers with first-class tickets being questioned, harassed, or downgraded. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What had begun as a single incident was expanding into evidence of a pattern of discrimination, the foundation for a potentially devastating class action lawsuit. Get her full statement, Naomi directed. Ensure she understands the potential repercussions of becoming a whistleblower, but also that we can provide legal protection. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Naomi remained at the table studying the growing social media response. The story was resonating far beyond a simple airline incident. It had touched a nerve in the national conversation about race, how spaces remained unofficially segregated, how the simple act of existing, while black in certain environments, still triggered scrutiny and suspicion. Her phone buzzed again with a text from her mother. "Saw the news. Your father and I are so proud of you for standing your ground. This is why we marched all those years ago. Love you." The message brought unexpected tears to Naomi's eyes. Her parents had faced fire hoses and police dogs during civil rights protests in the 1960s. 60 years later, their daughter was still fighting variations of the same battle, more subtle perhaps, but no less damaging. Marcus returned with fresh coffee, setting a cup beside her. "You okay?" Naomi showed him the text. "It's strange being on this side of the case. I keep thinking about all our clients over the years, how they felt in these moments." "You're handling it with the same grace they did," Marcus assured her. "And Summit has no idea what's coming." Outside the law firm's windows, the Chicago skyline gleamed in the afternoon sun, while across the country, in Summit Airlines corporate headquarters, emergency meetings were being convened as executives began to grasp the magnitude of their crisis. The initial videos had gone viral, their stock was falling, and customer service was reporting unprecedented cancellations. What had started as one crew's decision to remove a passenger was rapidly evolving into a corporate nightmare, with no easy resolution. By morning, Summit Airlines would face the full strategic force of one of the nation's premier civil rights law firms. And by the end of tomorrow's trading day, $500 million of company value would vanish as investors fled from the gathering storm. The battle lines were drawn, but only one side truly understood the war that was coming. The conference room at Jenkins & Washington law firm had transformed into a command center by early evening. 3 whiteboards were covered with strategic notes, timelines, and legal citations. Laptops and tablets illuminated determined faces as the expanded team worked with methodical precision. Naomi stood at the center of this controlled chaos, reviewing documents while speaking into a conference call. Despite her split lip and the emotional toll of the day, she projected absolute focus. This was familiar territory, just usually from the advocate's side rather than the client's. "The press conference is scheduled for 9 a.m., she confirmed to the media team. "We'll distribute preliminary evidence packets to selected journalists at 8:30. Marcus will handle the initial statement, then I'll take questions." As she ended the call, Marcus approached with a secure tablet. "Tanya Williams came through in a big way," he said, his voice low with controlled anger. "This goes deeper than we thought." Naomi took the tablet, scanning the whistleblower's detailed statement and supporting documents. Tanya Williams, a black flight attendant with Summit for 7 years, had been secretly documenting a pattern of discriminatory practices within the airline. "They have an actual policy?" Naomi's voice was incredulous as she read further. "Not officially on paper," Marcus clarified, "but look at the training materials." Naomi scrolled to the presentation slides from Summit's flight attendant training program. One section titled Premium Cabin Management contained disturbing guidance. "Ensure passengers match typical first-class demographic profile," and "discreetly verify credentials of passengers who may appear out of place." "This is corporate sanctioned profiling," Naomi murmured, continuing to read. "Did she provide the data on passenger removals?" Marcus nodded grimly. 24 black passengers with valid first-class tickets were questioned, harassed, or removed in the past year. Only 2 white passengers faced similar treatment, both for actual rule violations involving alcohol. The implications were staggering. What had happened to Naomi wasn't an isolated incident or the actions of a few biased employees. It reflected systematic discrimination embedded in corporate culture and training. "We need to verify this independently," Naomi decided. "Reach out to our contacts at the Department of Transportation. See if there's a pattern in the formal complaints filed against Summit." As Marcus left to make the calls, Rebecca Goldstein entered with fresh social media analytics. "The story has gone international," she reported. Over 15 million views across platforms. Celebrity influencers are weighing in, mostly supporting you. Summit's stock closed down 12%. Today, Naomi nodded, processing this information. What's their PR response so far? Still stonewalling, Rebecca replied. Their updated statement claims they're conducting a thorough investigation, but continues to frame it as a passenger compliance issue rather than discrimination. And the crew members involved? Captain Morgan gave an interview to Aviation Daily, claiming you were argumentative and refused reasonable crew instructions. Flight attendant Barbara Reynolds hasn't made any public statements, but her social media history. Rebecca hesitated. What about it? Naomi prompted. Our digital team found several problematic posts she tried to delete today, complaints about entitled minorities, and memes mocking black passengers. Screenshots have already leaked to Twitter. This revelation didn't surprise Naomi, but it strengthened their case considerably. Add those to the evidence packet for tomorrow. The door opened again, and Terrence entered with another tablet. We've been digging into Summit's corporate structure and major investors, he explained. Something interesting came up. He displayed a complex ownership diagram. Summit's parent company, Apex Holdings, has several major investors with troubling histories. The largest Winchester Capital has settled 3 discrimination lawsuits in the past decade. Their founder, Gerald Winchester, sits on Summit's board and has a history of opposing diversity initiatives. Naomi studied the connections, seeing the bigger picture emerge. So this goes beyond frontline employees to the very top of the corporate structure. Exactly, Terrence confirmed. Winchester specifically blocked a proposed diversity training program last year, calling it unnecessary political correctness. This information added another dimension to their strategy. The problem wasn't just biased flight attendants. It was corporate leadership that enabled and protected discriminatory practices. As the team continued building their case, Naomi stepped away briefly to a quiet corner office. The adrenaline that had carried her through the day was fading, leaving room for the emotional impact to surface. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched her swollen lip. The humiliation of being dragged from the plane played in her mind. The stares, the physical manhandling, the blood on her blouse. As a civil rights attorney, she had counseled countless clients through similar traumas, but experiencing it firsthand revealed dimensions she hadn't fully appreciated before. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Just saw you on the news. Remember what we always taught you. They can take your seat but never your dignity. Proud of you, baby girl. Naomi smiled despite her pain, drawing strength from her family's legacy of resilience. 3 generations of her family had faced discrimination in different forms. Her grandparents under Jim Crow laws, her parents during the civil rights movement, and now her in the supposedly post-racial corporate America. The forms evolved, but the underlying prejudice remained. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Jasmine entered with concern on her face. We're getting reports. That Summit's PR team is digging into your background, she warned. They're looking for anything they can use to discredit you. Standard playbook, Naomi nodded. Let them try. My record speaks for itself. There's more, Jasmine continued hesitantly. We've detected what appears to be a coordinated effort to shift the narrative online. Suddenly there are dozens of accounts claiming you were actually disruptive on the flight, that you demanded special treatment, that the whole thing is a setup for a lawsuit. Trolls or organized campaign? Naomi asked. Looks organized. The accounts use similar language and timing. We suspect Summit has engaged a crisis management firm that specializes in reputation attacks. Naomi absorbed this news without surprise. Document everything. It strengthens our case that they're more concerned with attacking me than addressing their discriminatory practices. Returning to the main conference room, Naomi found Marcus ending a call, his expression grim but satisfied. Summit's CEO William Patterson just gave an interview to CNBC, he reported. He claimed you were playing the race card, and that the incident had nothing to do with discrimination. Rebecca looked up from her laptop. I've got the clip. The team gathered around her screen to watch Summit CEO William Patterson, a polished white man in his 60s, speaking confidently to the financial news network. While we regret any misunderstanding with Ms. Jenkins, Summit Airlines does not discriminate. This incident involved a passenger who became confrontational when asked to comply with crew instructions. Ms. Jenkins is a professional attorney who specializes in discrimination lawsuits, and we believe this confrontation was engineered to create exactly the social media storm we're now seeing. Summit treats all passengers with respect regardless of race, gender, or background. The room fell silent as the clip ended. Then Marcus smiled tightly. He just did our job for us. He publicly accused me of fabricating a discrimination incident for financial gain, Naomi noted, her legal mind immediately processing the implications. That's defamation per se. And he did it while the physical evidence of your injuries is still visible, Rebecca added. Perfect timing for our press conference tomorrow. As the evening progressed, the strategy evolved from addressing a single incident to exposing a pattern of corporate-sanctioned discrimination. The whistleblower's evidence, the CEO's inflammatory statements, and the coordinated smear campaign all painted a picture of a company more interested in covering up racism than confronting it. Around midnight, as the team was finalizing preparations for the morning press conference, Terrence burst into the room. New video just dropped, he announced, connecting his laptop to the main screen. Complete footage from 3 different passenger angles. The room watched in silence as the unedited videos showed the full incident from multiple perspectives. Unlike the partial clips that had circulated earlier, these captured every moment. From Naomi's calm assertions of her rights to the excessive force used to remove her, the blood dripping from her lip, and the stunned expressions of other passengers. Most damaging of all, the videos clearly showed Trevor Whitfield stating, "I don't feel comfortable sitting next to her kind," and Barbara Reynolds responding, "I understand completely, sir. We'll take care of it." The explicit racial nature of the incident, previously contested by Summit, was now undeniable. "Where did these come from?" Naomi asked, her voice quiet. "Anonymous uploads," Terrence explained. "But based on the angles, they appear to be from passengers in rows 1, 3, and across the aisle. They're spreading faster than the original clips." Marcus checked his phone as notifications poured in. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox are all running the new footage. Summit's PR team just canceled their scheduled morning shows. Naomi stood, addressing her team with renewed purpose. "Update the press packets with the new videos. We're no longer just addressing my incident. We're exposing a corporate culture that enables and protects systematic discrimination." As the team dispersed to incorporate the new evidence, Naomi gazed out the window at the Chicago skyline, illuminated against the night sky. Tomorrow would bring a very public battle against a powerful corporation, but tonight had revealed their most critical weakness. Summit Airlines cared more about protecting their image than addressing the why rot within their organization. By this time tomorrow, that misplaced priority would cost them $500 million in market value, as investors recognized what Summit's leadership failed to see. In the modern world, corporate accountability for discrimination wasn't optional. It was essential for survival. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the hotel conference room as cameras flashed and reporters jostled for position. Every major news network had sent correspondents, their satellite trucks lining the street outside. Social media, live streams were broadcasting to millions of viewers worldwide. Naomi Jenkins stood at the podium, her presence commanding despite the visible injury to her lip. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, she projected strength and dignity as Marcus concluded his opening statement. "And now," Marcus announced, "Naomi Jenkins will share her experience and take your questions." The room fell silent as Naomi stepped forward. Her voice was steady, her words measured and precise. "Yesterday morning, I boarded Summit Airlines, Flight 537, with a valid first-class ticket purchased with frequent flyer miles I earned as a platinum member who flies over 100,000 miles annually. I was forcibly removed from that flight, not for any violation of rules or regulations, but because a white passenger expressed discomfort sitting next to me, and the Summit Airlines crew chose to accommodate his racial bias rather than respect my rights as a paying customer." She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to settle. What happened to me was not an isolated incident. Evidence we're releasing today shows that Summit Airlines has a pattern of discriminating against black passengers in first class. In the past year alone, 24 black passengers with valid first-class tickets were questioned, harassed, or removed from Summit flights, compared to just 2 white passengers, both of whom had actually violated airline policies. Camera. Shutters clicked rapidly as reporters scribbled notes. Naomi continued, her voice gathering strength. This discrimination isn't the result of a few biased employees. It stems from corporate policies that instruct crew to ensure passengers match the typical first-class demographic profile and to verify credentials of passengers who appear out of place. These are Summit's words, not mine. She gestured to the evidence packets being distributed to journalists. Last night, Summit Airlines CEO William Patterson publicly accused me of fabricating this incident for financial gain, an allegation that is demonstrably false and defamatory. Rather than addressing the discrimination within his company, Mr. Patterson chose to attack my character and professional integrity. As questions erupted from the press corps, Naomi maintained perfect composure, answering with the precision of the accomplished attorney she was. When asked about her demands, her response was clear. This isn't about money. It's about accountability and systemic change. Summit Airlines must acknowledge the discrimination that occurred, terminate the employees responsible, implement comprehensive anti-bias training, and establish independent oversight of their practices. By noon, the press conference had dominated news cycles. The hashtag Boycott Summit was trending #1 worldwide, with celebrities and influencers amplifying the call. Summit's social media accounts were flooded with criticism and cancellation announcements. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wondered if speaking up would make any difference? Naomi's courage is changing an entire industry overnight. Comment #1. If you believe more people should stand up against discrimination like she did. Or #2 if you think individual actions can't change corporate behavior. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in holding powerful companies accountable, and subscribe for more stories about ordinary people creating extraordinary change. How far do you think this boycott will go? Let's see what happened as the public pressure mounted. In the corporate headquarters of Summit Airlines, panic was setting in. The executive conference room had been converted into a crisis command center, with marketing, legal, and PR teams working frantically to contain the expanding disaster. Our call centers are overwhelmed with cancellations, reported the customer service director. Wait times are over 2 hours, and many customers are simply disputing charges through their credit card companies instead of waiting. The chief financial officer looked up from his laptop, his face ashen. The stock opened down 18%. We've lost over $300 million in market value since opening bell. Summit's board of directors had convened an emergency meeting, connecting virtually from across the country. Gerald Winchester of Winchester Capital, the largest investor, appeared on the main screen, his expression thunderous. "This is a catastrophe of management's making," Winchester declared. Patterson's CNBC interview poured gasoline on the fire. "We need to contain this immediately." In a desperate attempt to stem the bleeding, Summit's PR team released a new statement. "Summit Airlines takes these allegations seriously. We have placed the crew members involved in yesterday's incident on administrative leave pending a thorough investigation. We are committed to treating all passengers with dignity and respect, and we do not tolerate discrimination of any kind." The statement was immediately criticized for referring to documented events as allegations and for failing to address the systemic issues or apologize to Naomi directly. Meanwhile, at Jenkins in Washington, the team monitored the unfolding crisis. Reports came in of major corporate clients suspending their Summit travel contracts. Delta, American, and United Airlines issued statements reaffirming their commitment to diversity and inclusion, tacitly distancing themselves from Summit's practices. Southwest just announced a Respect in the Skies initiative, Rebecca reported. They're explicitly capitalizing on Summit's crisis. Naomi nodded, reviewing the latest updates. "What's the status on the class action?" Terrence pulled up a digital map showing potential plaintiffs across the country. 27 individuals who experienced similar discrimination on Summit. Flights have already contacted us. We're vetting their cases now. The morning's press conference had transformed what Summit hoped to contain as a single incident into a nationwide movement for accountability. Black in First Class was trending alongside "Ache Boycott Summit," with thousands sharing their own experiences of travel discrimination. Throughout the day, more employees came forward. A ground crew supervisor revealed that Summit gate agents were informally instructed to scrutinize certain passengers' first-class tickets more carefully than others. A former flight attendant trainer confirmed that crews were evaluated partly on maintaining the appropriate premium cabin atmosphere, a coded reference to catering to wealthy white passengers' comfort. By mid-afternoon, the crisis took another turn when Trevor Whitfield, the passenger whose discomfort had triggered Naomi's removal, gave an unexpected interview to CNN. "I regret my behavior," Whitfield admitted, looking uncomfortable. "I had no legitimate reason to feel uncomfortable sitting next to Ms. Jenkins. I acted on implicit bias that I'm now forced to confront. The airline staff should have challenged my inappropriate request rather than accommodating it." This public acknowledgement from the very passenger who initiated the incident further undermined Summit's attempts to blame Naomi for what happened. As the business day progressed, the financial impact deepened. Summit's stock continued its free fall, triggering circuit breakers twice. Institutional investors began issuing statements of concern, and rumors circulated about emergency board discussions regarding CEO William Patterson's future. While the corporate crisis unfolded publicly, Naomi faced personal challenges behind the scenes. Death threats arrived by email and social media, requiring her law firm to hire additional security. Her home address was doxed by extremist groups, forcing her to temporarily relocate to a hotel. "We've received 14 credible threats in the past 3 hours," reported the security consultant. "Most are just keyboard warriors, but 3 warrant serious concern." Naomi absorbed this news with outward calm, though the reality of becoming a target weighed heavily. Her position as a prominent black woman challenging a powerful corporation had made her a lightning rod for racial hatred. "Increase security at the office and ensure all team members have protection if needed," she directed. "We won't be intimidated." That evening, as Summit Airlines approached $400 million in lost market value, their board of directors reached a critical decision. William Patterson was asked to step aside temporarily while the company navigated the crisis. An emergency press release announced that Chief Operating Officer Victoria Chen would serve as interim CEO effective immediately. Victoria Chen, a 52-year-old Asian American woman with 20 years of airline industry experience, represented Summit's attempt to signal change. Within hours of her appointment, she requested a private meeting with Naomi Jenkins, a dramatic shift from Patterson's combative approach. "Should we take the meeting?" Marcus asked as they reviewed the request. Naomi considered the strategic implications. "Yes, but on our terms, at our offices, with our full legal team present." As night fell on the first full day of the crisis, Summit Airlines' market value had plummeted by over $450 million. Cancellations continued to flood their system, and travel agencies reported customers specifically requesting any airline but Summit. In less than 36 hours, a single act of discrimination witnessed by a plane full of passengers had evolved into a national referendum on corporate accountability for racism. By morning, the $500 million threshold of lost value would be crossed, setting records for the fastest reputation-driven financial collapse in airline industry history. What Summit's leadership failed to understand, and what Naomi Jenkins knew from years of civil rights work, was that in the modern era, consumers expected more than performance solidarity. They demanded genuine accountability, and they wielded unprecedented power to enforce it through their voices, choices, and dollars. The battle was far from over, but the leverage had shifted decisively. When Victoria Chen walked into Jenkins and Washington's offices tomorrow, she would do so not as a corporate power broker, but as the representative of a company fighting for its very survival. The digital display on the trading floor showed Summit Airlines' stock in free fall, down 26% since market opening, triggering the third circuit breaker of the morning. The $500 million threshold of lost market value had been crossed within minutes of the opening bell, and the collapse showed no signs of slowing. In Summit's emergency board meeting, faces were grim as financial analysts presented the catastrophic numbers. Cancellations had reached unprecedented levels, with their booking system showing 62% fewer reservations compared to the previous week. Corporate travel accounts, the lifeblood of their premium cabin revenue, were suspending contracts en masse. "This is existential," declared the chief financial officer, his voice tight with stress. "At this burn rate, we're looking at potential bankruptcy proceedings within 90 days unless we stop the bleeding." Gerald Winchester, joining virtually from his Manhattan office, no longer bothered hiding his fury. Patterson's handling of this situation has destroyed $500 million in shareholder value in less than 48 hours. "This is the most catastrophic executive failure I've witnessed in 30 years of investing." The boardroom doors opened, and William Patterson entered for what would be his final appearance as CEO. Ashen-faced and visibly sleep-deprived, he took his seat as the board chairman delivered the inevitable news. "Bill, the board has voted unanimously. You're terminated, effective immediately. Victoria Chen will continue as interim CEO while we conduct a search for permanent leadership." Patterson nodded stiffly, having expected this outcome. "I understand. For the record, I still believe we followed proper protocols regarding the Jenkins incident." Winchester's voice cut through the video conference speakers. "That delusion is exactly why you're being fired, Bill. The videos clearly show racial discrimination that's costing us hundreds of millions. Your failure to recognize that reality makes you unfit to lead." As Patterson was escorted from the building, Victoria Chen assembled her crisis team in the executive suite. At 52, Chen had navigated numerous airline industry challenges, but nothing compared to the existential threat Summit now faced. "Our first priority is stopping the financial hemorrhage," she stated, addressing the somber executives. "And that begins with acknowledging reality. What happened to Naomi Jenkins was inexcusable discrimination that reflects systemic problems within our company." The shift in tone was dramatic. After 2 days of denials and deflection under Patterson, Chen's candor stunned the room into silence. "I've reviewed all videos, audio recordings, and internal communications," she continued. "The evidence is irrefutable. A valued customer with a valid first-class ticket was removed from our aircraft because of racial bias. Our crew enabled that. Discrimination instead of preventing it. Our training materials inadvertently encouraged profiling, and our former CEO compounded the damage by attacking Ms. Jenkins rather than taking responsibility." She pulled up a presentation slide showing the afternoon's scheduled meeting. "In 2 hours, I'll be meeting with Naomi Jenkins and her legal team. I'm going prepared to acknowledge these facts, offer a genuine apology, and present a comprehensive plan for systemic change. Any questions?" The head of legal raised his hand hesitantly. "Ms. Chen, admitting fault to this degree could significantly increase our liability exposure, and continuing to deny the obvious will destroy this company entirely," Chen replied firmly. "Sometimes the right thing morally is also the right thing financially. This is one of those times." Across town, Naomi Jenkins prepared for the meeting. In her law firm's conference room. The past 48 hours had been exhausting, but validating. What began as a humiliating personal experience had catalyzed a national conversation about race, privilege, and corporate accountability. "Victoria Chen's background is impressive," Marcus noted, reviewing her profile. 20 years in the industry, MBA from Wharton, reputation as a change agent at her previous airline. "She's also faced discrimination herself," Rebecca added. In a 2018 industry conference, she spoke about being mistaken for service staff despite being an executive vice president at the time. Naomi absorbed this information, considering its strategic implications. She may genuinely understand the issues at stake here, but that doesn't mean her primary loyalty isn't to salvaging Summit's business. The firm's security team conducted a final sweep of the conference room before the high-stakes meeting. The threats against Naomi had intensified overnight, requiring armed guards at all entrances to the building. Her parents had been moved to a secure location after their home address was published on extremist forums. "The security situation is deteriorating," reported the head of their protection detail. "We've identified 3 credible death threats that warrant FBI involvement." Naomi nodded grimly. Becoming the face of this fight had personal costs she'd anticipated but whose emotional weight still surprised her. As a civil rights attorney, she'd always stood beside clients facing such threats. Experiencing them directly revealed dimensions of vulnerability she hadn't fully appreciated before. "Maintain all precautions," she directed, "but we won't be intimidated into silence." At precisely 2 o'clock, Victoria Chen arrived with a minimal team, just Summit's new general counsel and chief diversity officer. The contrast with typical corporate delegations, which often included armies of lawyers and PR specialists, was immediately noticeable. After introductions, Chen opened with unexpected directness. "Ms. Jenkins, I want to begin by offering my personal and professional apology for the discriminatory treatment you experienced on our aircraft. What happened to you was wrong, inexcusable, and reflects failures at multiple levels of our organization." The room fell silent. After days of Summit's denials and deflections, this unequivocal acknowledgement shifted the dynamic considerably. "Your apology is noted," Naomi replied carefully, "but acknowledgement alone isn't sufficient. We're seeking specific actions and structural changes." Chen nodded. "I understand completely. That's why I've brought a comprehensive proposal addressing both your personal experience and the systemic issues it exposed." She presented a detailed document outlining immediate actions: termination of all employees involved in the incident, $5 million in personal damages to Naomi, and a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. More significantly, the proposal included structural reforms: mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, revision of all training materials to eliminate discriminatory guidance, establishment of an independent oversight committee with civil rights representatives, and $50 million dedicated to industry-wide diversity initiatives. "This proposal demonstrates our commitment to meaningful change," Chen concluded. "We're prepared to implement these measures immediately, without requiring any confidentiality agreements or restrictions on your advocacy." Naomi and Marcus exchanged glances, both surprised by the proposal's scope. It addressed many of their demands without the usual corporate hedging and gag orders. "We'll need to review the details thoroughly," Naomi responded, "and there are additional concerns regarding pattern and practice discrimination that must be addressed." "Of course," Chen agreed. "I should also mention that this morning, our board authorized me to increase both the personal compensation and the structural reform funding if necessary to reach a comprehensive agreement. Summit is committed to making this right, not just for PR purposes, but because it's the correct path forward." As the meeting continued, a different kind of conversation was unfolding online. Summit's stock had stabilized slightly following news of Patterson's termination and Chen's appointment, but the company had already lost over $500 million in market value, a financial catastrophe triggered by a single act of discrimination and the subsequent mishandling of its aftermath. Financial analysts were publishing urgent updates: 200 Airlines, SUMT, facing existential crisis following discrimination incident, stock down 28% in 2 days, major institutional investors considering complete divestment, bankruptcy risk elevated unless immediate resolution achieved. The business press had shifted from covering a PR crisis to questioning Summit's very survival. CNBC's headline captured the sentiment: "Summit's 500 malheureuse nosedive. How one act of discrimination might bankrupt an airline." As the negotiations at Jenkins and Washington continued into the evening, Victoria Chen received an urgent message from Summit's board. Their largest institutional investor had given an ultimatum: demonstrate meaningful resolution within 24 hours, or they would divest their entire position, likely triggering a fatal collapse in stock price. Chen shared this development candidly with Naomi. "The financial pressure is extreme, but I want to be clear. Our commitment to addressing these issues properly isn't just about saving the company. It's about building the company we should have been all along." For the first time, Naomi detected genuine conviction beyond crisis management. "Ms. Chen, may I ask a personal question? Why did you accept this position at such a perilous moment?" Chen paused, considering her answer carefully. 20 years ago, I was removed from a first-class cabin despite having a valid ticket. The airline crew simply couldn't believe an Asian woman in casual clothes belonged there. No one recorded it. No one advocated for me. Nothing changed. She met Naomi's gaze directly. When I saw what happened to you, I recognized an opportunity to address something I've witnessed throughout my career. The airline industry has systematic problems with race and belonging. Someone needs to lead the change. It might as well be me. This unexpected moment of shared experience shifted the atmosphere in the room. The negotiation continued with renewed purpose, focusing on ensuring that any agreement would create lasting institutional change, rather than merely resolving the immediate crisis. By midnight, as Summit's international flights departed with unprecedented numbers of empty seats, the framework of an agreement had emerged, one that would address Naomi's personal injury while establishing mechanisms for systemic transformation. Within Summit and potentially across the airline industry, what had begun as a routine business trip had evolved into a watershed moment for corporate accountability. The $500 million in lost market value had finally captured what civil rights advocates had argued for decades. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong. In the modern connected era, it was financially catastrophic. As the meeting concluded, Victoria Chen extended her hand to Naomi. Thank you for forcing us to confront issues we should have addressed long ago. Sometimes institutions need a powerful shock to change course. Naomi accepted the handshake with measured optimism. The real test will be what Summit looks like a year from now, and whether other corporations learn from your experience. Outside, news crews remained camped at the building entrance, waiting for word of an agreement that might either save an airline or cement its demise. The next 24 hours would determine not just Summit's fate, but potentially set new standards for how corporations handled discrimination in an era where accountability could no longer be avoided. The law firm's conference room had been transformed into a negotiation headquarters as legal teams from both sides worked through the night. Whiteboards covered with terms and conditions lined the walls, while empty coffee cups and takeout containers testified to the marathon session underway. Naomi and Victoria sat at opposite ends of the mahogany table, both showing signs of exhaustion, but maintaining the intense focus that had propelled them to leadership positions in their respective fields. Between them, their legal teams methodically addressed each point of the evolving agreement. The Independent Oversight Committee is non-negotiable, Naomi insisted, referencing the proposed body that would monitor Summit's compliance with anti-discrimination measures. It must have real authority, including the power to audit practices and recommend personnel actions. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. I agree in principle, but our board is concerned about ceding operational control to external parties. What if we structure it as a review board with guaranteed investigative access, but require a supermajority for binding recommendations? This pattern of proposal and counter-proposal had continued for hours, gradually building a framework that balanced accountability with practical implementation. Unlike typical corporate negotiations that prioritize damage control and minimal concessions, this process felt genuinely transformative, addressing root causes rather than symptoms. We've received preliminary board approval for the financial terms, Victoria reported after a private call. $50 million in personal damages and $200 million for the industry-wide diversity initiative. The numbers were unprecedented, far exceeding typical discrimination settlements. But as Summit's legal team had finally recognized, this case had already cost them $500 million in market value. The company's very survival depended on demonstrating meaningful change. The financial terms are acceptable, Naomi acknowledged. But money alone doesn't create cultural transformation. The structural changes are equally important. As dawn approached, they had reached agreement on most major points. Termination of all employees involved in the incident, complete overhaul of training materials, mandatory anti-bias education for all staff, and the establishment of the Independent Oversight Committee with diverse representation. Victoria Chen requested a brief private meeting with Naomi as their teams took a breakfast break. In a smaller conference room, away from the lawyers and staff, she spoke with unexpected candor. I want you to understand something, Victoria began. Some of our board members still don't fully grasp what's happening here. They're treating this as a PR crisis to manage rather than a fundamental ethical failure requiring transformation. Naomi's expression remained neutral. That doesn't surprise me. Corporate culture changes slowly, especially at the top. I'm fighting those attitudes internally, Victoria continued. But I need you to know that I personally experienced what you did, though without the physical injury or public exposure. 20 years ago, I was asked to move from first class because another passenger felt uncomfortable. When I refused, the flight attendant said, "People like you should be grateful we let you fly at all." Victoria's professional composure cracked slightly as she shared this memory. No one recorded it. No one advocated for me. I filed a complaint that disappeared into corporate bureaucracy. Nothing changed. Naomi studied the interim CEO with new understanding. "So this is personal for you too?" "Yes," Victoria admitted. "When I saw what happened to you, I recognized not just a crisis for Summit, but an opportunity to address problems I've witnessed throughout my career. The airline industry has systematic issues with race and belonging. Someone needs to lead real change." This moment of shared experience created an unexpected bridge between adversaries. Both women had navigated predominantly white corporate spaces their entire careers, developing the composure and strategic thinking necessary for survival while never surrendering their dignity. "The agreement we're crafting isn't just about resolving your case," Victoria continued. "It's about creating a template for transformation that other companies might follow, not because it's profitable or generates good PR, but because it's right." When they returned to the main negotiation, the dynamic had subtly shifted. The discussion moved beyond specific terms to the broader vision of what Summit Airlines could become, an industry leader in inclusive practices rather than a cautionary tale of discrimination's consequences. By mid-morning, news had leaked that negotiations were nearing completion. Summit stock had stabilized somewhat, though still down 25% from its pre-incident value. Financial analysts speculated about the settlement's impact on the company's future. As the legal teams finalized documentation, a new challenge emerged. Anonymous threats against both Naomi and Victoria had intensified overnight, suggesting a coordinated campaign to derail the agreement. Summit's security team reported suspicious activity targeting their corporate systems, while Jenkins and Washington detected multiple attempted intrusions into their network. "The backlash is escalating," Marcus informed Naomi during a break. "We've traced some of the threats to sources connected with extremist groups, but others appear linked to corporate interests, possibly competitors hoping Summit collapses, or business associates of former CEO Patterson." This external pressure only strengthened both women's resolve to complete the agreement. By early afternoon, all major points had been addressed, and the final document was being prepared for signatures. As they waited, Victoria received an urgent message. Summit's digital security team had discovered text messages between former CEO William Patterson and board member Gerald Winchester discussing how to handle the situation if any of those people cause problems in first class. The messages, dated 6 months earlier, referenced a policy of discreetly discouraging undesirable elements from premium cabins. Victoria immediately shared this information with Naomi. "This confirms what we suspected. The discrimination was known and tacitly approved at the highest levels." Naomi's legal team quickly incorporated this new evidence into the final agreement, strengthening the language around leadership accountability and board-level oversight of anti-discrimination measures. By late afternoon, the comprehensive agreement was ready. At 78 pages, it represented the most detailed corporate anti-discrimination framework ever negotiated in the airline industry. The financial terms, $50 million in personal damages to Naomi and $200 million for industry-wide initiatives, were accompanied by structural changes that would fundamentally transform Summit's culture and practices. As Naomi reviewed the final document, she reflected on the journey from her humiliating removal from Flight 537 to this moment of systemic change. The personal cost had been substantial: threats, media scrutiny, the emotional toll of becoming the face of yet another racial incident. But the potential impact extended far beyond her individual experience to address patterns of discrimination affecting countless travelers. Victoria Chen signed first, her signature representing Summit Airlines' commitment to transformation. When Naomi added her signature, the room fell momentarily silent, acknowledging the historic nature of the agreement. "We'll announce this jointly tomorrow morning," Victoria confirmed. "Complete transparency about what happened and what we're doing to ensure it never happens again." As the meeting concluded, Victoria added one final thought. "Ms. Jenkins, I want to thank you for your courage and persistence. Most people would have accepted the voucher and moved on. Your refusal to do so might well save this company by forcing us to become what we should have been all along." Outside, as evening fell on the third day of the crisis, news of an imminent agreement had already begun to shift the narrative. Summit stock had recovered slightly in late trading, though the company had still lost nearly $500 million in market value since the incident. What neither woman could fully predict was how their agreement would reshape not just one airline, but potentially an entire industry's approach to diversity, equity, and belonging. The transformation born from a moment of discrimination would eventually extend far beyond what either had imagined possible when Naomi was dragged bleeding from her rightful seat in first class just 72 hours earlier. Camera flashes illuminated the hotel ballroom as Naomi Jenkins and Victoria Chen stood side by side at the podium. Behind them, a backdrop displayed the logos of both Summit Airlines and the newly established Transportation Equity Foundation. The room was packed with journalists from around the world, all focused on the historic announcement about to be made. Victoria spoke first, her voice steady and clear. 3 days ago, Summit Airlines failed in our most fundamental obligation: to treat all customers with dignity and respect regardless of race, gender, or background. Naomi Jenkins, a distinguished attorney and valued customer, was wrongfully removed from her rightful first-class seat due to racial bias. Today, we acknowledge that failure without qualification and announce comprehensive measures to ensure it never happens again. She turned slightly toward Naomi, whose split lip had begun to heal but remained visible, a physical reminder of the incident's reality that no corporate statement could erase. "On behalf of Summit Airlines, I offer our deepest apology to Ms. Jenkins for the discrimination, humiliation, and physical injury she experienced. This apology extends to all passengers who have faced similar treatment in our cabins. What happened was inexcusable, and we are taking unprecedented steps to address both this specific incident and the systemic issues it revealed." Victoria then outlined the agreement's key points: $50 million in personal damages to Naomi, termination of all employees involved in the discrimination, and establishment of the Transportation Equity Foundation with a $200 million endowment to promote diversity throughout the industry. Most significantly, she announced structural changes that would transform Summit from within: mandatory comprehensive anti-bias training for all 28,000 employees, revision of all training materials to eliminate discriminatory guidance, creation of an independent oversight committee with civil rights leaders, and implementation of the industry's first anonymous reporting system for discrimination incidents. These measures represent not just crisis management, but a fundamental recommitment to equity as a core value, Victoria concluded. Summit Airlines will become the industry leader in inclusive practices, not because it's profitable, but because it's right. When Naomi stepped to the microphone, the room fell silent. Her presence carried the moral authority of someone who had faced injustice and transformed it into opportunity for systemic change. "What happened to me on Flight 537 reflects patterns of discrimination that many travelers experience daily," she began. "The difference in my case was that it was recorded, witnessed, and impossible to deny. This agreement isn't about one incident or one airline. It's about acknowledging that spaces remain unofficially segregated in America, and that corporations have a responsibility to dismantle rather than reinforce these barriers." She outlined the Transportation Equity Foundation's mission: to conduct research, develop training programs, and establish industry-wide standards for inclusive practices across all transportation sectors. "This foundation will ensure that the change begins but doesn't end with Summit Airlines," Naomi explained. "Its independent board will include civil rights leaders, transportation experts, and affected community members working together to transform how we all move through the world." The press conference continued with questions from journalists, all answered with remarkable transparency. When asked if the financial settlement was excessive, Victoria responded without hesitation: Summit Airlines lost $500 million in market value because of discriminatory practices, and our initial failure to address them properly. This agreement isn't just morally right, it's financially necessary for our survival. The lesson for corporate America should be clear. Discrimination isn't just wrong, it's devastatingly expensive. As the formal announcement concluded, markets responded immediately. Summit stock began to recover, with financial analysts noting that the clear accountability and forward-looking strategy had restored some investor confidence. Though the company's value remained significantly below pre-incident levels, the existential threat of collapse had receded. In the weeks that followed, the agreement's implementation began in earnest. The first visible change came when Barbara Reynolds, Melissa Parker, and Captain Richard Morgan, the crew members involved in Naomi's removal, were publicly terminated for violations of company policy and failure to uphold basic standards of equal treatment. The message to all Summit employees was unmistakable. Discrimination would no longer be tolerated at any level. Next came the comprehensive review of training materials. Outside experts identified and eliminated problematic language, including the directive to ensure passengers match typical first-class demographic profile. New guidelines explicitly instructed crew members to challenge rather than accommodate passenger requests based on racial discomfort. The Independent Oversight Committee assembled with remarkable speed, bringing together respected civil rights leaders, transportation experts, and diverse community representatives. Their first meeting, live-streamed to demonstrate transparency, established clear metrics for measuring progress and mechanisms for accountability. 3 months after the incident, Naomi Jenkins boarded another Summit Airlines flight, this time as an honored guest on the inaugural journey of the airline's New Era initiative. The first-class cabin now featured crew members of diverse backgrounds, including several who had been passed over for premium cabin assignments under previous leadership. In a powerful moment of reconciliation, the lead flight attendant, a black woman who had been restricted to economy service for years despite seniority, personally welcomed Naomi aboard. On behalf of the new Summit Airlines, welcome to first class, where everyone with a ticket belongs. The industry-wide impact spread rapidly. Competing airlines, recognizing the financial and reputational risks of similar incidents, rushed to implement their own diversity initiatives. The Transportation Equity Foundation began publishing quarterly scorecards rating airlines on inclusive practices, creating market incentives for improvement. 6 months later, Summit Airlines had recovered much of its lost market value while transforming its corporate culture. Victoria Chen's interim role had been made permanent, with the board recognizing her leadership in navigating the crisis. Most significantly, passenger surveys showed increased satisfaction across demographic groups, demonstrating that inclusion enhanced rather than detracted from the customer experience. 1 year after being dragged bleeding from her rightful seat, Naomi Jenkins stood before a classroom of law students at Howard University, sharing lessons from what had become a landmark case in corporate accountability. The most powerful tool for change in corporate America isn't necessarily legislative or judicial action, she explained. It's the combination of irrefutable documentation, strategic advocacy, and market consequences. Summit Airlines didn't change because they suddenly developed a moral compass. They changed because discrimination cost them $500 million in 3 days. A student raised her hand. But would anything have changed if your removal hadn't been recorded and gone viral? Naomi's expression turned thoughtful. That's why documentation and solidarity matter so much. My parents marched for basic rights in the 60s with fire hoses turned on them. Today, our phones and social connections can be equally powerful, weapons in the continuing struggle for dignity and belonging. As she concluded her lecture, Naomi shared a final development. The Summit Airlines Board of Directors had unanimously approved the industry's first comprehensive anti-discrimination policy, with Naomi Jenkins herself appointed as chairperson of the Oversight Committee. The company that had once dragged her from first class now looked to her leadership to guide their transformation. Outside the lecture hall, Naomi met with her parents, the civil rights activists who had instilled in her the courage to stand her ground. Her father embraced her with tears in his eyes. "When we marched all those years ago," he said quietly, This is what we dreamed might be possible. Not just the right to sit anywhere, but the power to transform the places where we sit. Naomi nodded, understanding the generational journey that had brought her to this moment. The struggle for dignity and belonging continued, but the mechanisms for accountability had evolved. What remained constant was the courage to say, as she had with blood on her face, "This isn't over." And indeed it wasn't over, it was just beginning. The transformation sparked by one woman's refusal to surrender her rightful place had created ripples that would continue to expand, challenging institutions to become what they claimed to be. Spaces where justice wasn't just a slogan, but a lived reality for everyone who entered. Have you ever witnessed someone standing up against injustice and wondered what impact they truly made? Naomi's story shows how one person's courage can transform an entire industry. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling? Has this story changed how you might respond if you see something similar happen? Don't forget to like this video. If you believe in holding corporations accountable, subscribe for more powerful stories of everyday heroes creating extraordinary change, and share this with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right can truly make a difference. Thank you for joining me for this incredible journey of justice. And remember, sometimes the most powerful words you can say when facing injustice are simply, "This isn't over." Naomi Jenkins' experience reveals powerful truths about modern discrimination and accountability. First, documentation transforms individual suffering into irrefutable evidence. Her recorded removal exposed systemic racism that 200M Airlines couldn't deny. Second, corporate America responds most dramatically to financial consequences. $500 million in lost value accomplished what moral arguments alone couldn't. Third, true change requires both individual courage and institutional transformation. Naomi's refusal to accept a voucher forced 200M to confront deep-rooted biases. Fourth, discrimination isn't just wrong, it's financially devastating in today's connected world where consumers demand authentic corporate values. Finally, the journey from segregated spaces to true belonging continues across generations. What Naomi's parents fought for with protests, she advanced through strategic, legal action. The most profound lesson? Systems don't change because they develop conscience. They change when maintaining discrimination becomes more costly than eliminating it. One person's dignity, defended with courage and strategy, can transform entire industries. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced that went unchallenged? Naomi's courage reminds us that speaking truth to power can create lasting change, but it takes all of us standing together. Comment below with a time you stood up against injustice or wish you had. Your story might inspire someone else to find their voice. Has this journey changed how you'll respond if you witness discrimination during your travels? Let me know by typing, "I'll speak up" in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button. If you believe corporations should be held accountable for their actions, subscribe for more powerful stories of ordinary people creating extraordinary change, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that fighting for dignity matters. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey of justice, and remember, the most powerful words when facing discrimination might simply be, "This isn't over."